Welcome to Book Nook, the coziest place for book lovers to chat about the stories that shape us. I'm Marie.
And I'm Barbara, and each episode we dive into the books we love, the ones that challenge us, and everything in between. Ready to talk books? It's time to turn the page. Welcome back to Book Nook. How have you been, Mary?
Hey, Barbara. Good. So after a well-deserved month of break, we are
Yay!
back. Tell us what you did during this break.
I've been to France, to the south of France, back with my family for 2 weeks to celebrate my 30th birthday. And I had the best time, especially because it was 35 degrees. But let me tell you, when I came back home, I had a bit of a temperature shock because it's already like October, autumn in the UK, like 15 degrees in the afternoon. So it's a bit chilly.
I get that. I was lucky too with the weather when I was traveling in the east coast of the US. So that was fun, especially because at the end of the trip we went to a music festival and it was literally on the beach. So it's like you had the sand and everything, and so thank God we had nice weather for
Good.
most of the festival.
With the
But
most amazing lineup. We want to know.
yes, 10-year-old Marie was very happy because I got to see Green Day, and it's one of the, I don't know, most iconic rock band that I've
I'm so
listened,
jealous.
like maybe the first one that I listened to, like even before I had my Beatles phase and the Clash phase. Like I think Green Day was the first one that I got to know, and I don't know. So it was very moving, and the show was amazing. They were great. It was great. Yeah.
Wow, what a beautiful summer.
Yeah, it was so nice. I mean, when I came back here, it felt like going back to school, like
So
after the
that's a
holidays.
nice transition because we're back to school and we're back with classical books.
Yeah. And we decided to talk about Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. None of us had read it before, so it was the first time for us. Actually, for me, it's the first Dickens that I ever read.
Really?
So, like, I never got to read any of his books before. Obviously, I knew of his work and I had watched some adaptations, like BBC adaptations or other movies. So that was a good experience because I don't know, maybe we'll deep dive into this later on, I think.
Yeah.
But just to give a quick intro, I mean, I don't think we need to tell everyone who Charles Dickens is. He's an author, a British author, and he wrote this book in 1860, 1861, because actually this book was published not as a book, but in weekly installments in a magazine. I think that was something that was very popular at that time.
Yeah, but I think it's super interesting because you can see when you read the book and the different chapters, they're short and the way it's written, it's really fast paced and you realize, and I was wondering because it's quite modern. It's modern writing for the age.
Yes.
And now
Yes.
that I know it was published in a newspaper, that makes sense.
Yeah. And also, as you said, like short chapters, and sometimes you have cliffhangers.
Yeah.
It really feels like I can imagine people reading it in a magazine, and being like, I have to wait one more week to get like the next
Like a TV
story.
show, like
Yeah, like a
series when
TV
we were
show.
young, because we used to wait for a week for the next
We used to wait.
episode. Now we've got Netflix, so it's different, but yeah.
And thank God, because we do like binge watching sometimes. But anyway, so it was published that way, and maybe we can just give an introduction into like the story and also the kind of novel it is. I would say it's a pretty thick novel. I mean, it's maybe 500 pages, something like that. Not too bad, but not too short either. And it's a coming of age story. So we follow this young man who goes through a lot of different phases in his life, and basically him being growing up and maturing into an adult and all the different issues there are with that. And so the main character is named Pip. I think it's cute and funny.
Yeah.
It's what a nickname. Anyway, so Pip, he's an orphan and he lives with his sister. She's I don't know how much older she is. That I'm
No
not sure,
idea.
but
It
anyway,
doesn't say. I
no,
don't
I don't think he
remember.
says. So he lives with his sister and also Joe the blacksmith, her husband. And so what we get is her sister is very mean to him. So even though she decided to have her little brother with her because they don't have parents anymore, she's really mean. And Joe is more of this nice father figure. So anyway, that's the setup for the beginning. Very unhappy Pip living with his sister. He meets randomly, like he walks in a graveyard and he meets this convict and he decides to help this guy. I don't know about you, but at this stage in the story, I was like, what the fuck? What's happening? Like, I was like, why? This is so random. Like, we have Pip walking around in this graveyard looking at his family's graves and he's like meeting up with this convict, asking him for help, like for food and whatnot. And I was like, okay, what the fuck? Where is this leading? Anyway, so we have a lot of things happen, but why this title, Great Expectations? Pip, since he lives in a quite modest house, he doesn't come from a very, very wealthy family. His dream is to become a gentleman and to have money and to be able to be important. And so what happens is, out of nowhere, this lawyer goes to him and tells him, you have a secret benefactor who wants to give you a fortune and have you as a gentleman in London. And so
I
that's
think,
where,
sorry, you forgot something important. He wants to be a gentleman because he's in love with a young lady, but she's noble. So it's important for him to become a gentleman to be able to ask for help.
that is true
So that's the
because
main motivator behind.
that's a good point. And maybe we'll talk a bit more about this character, Miss Havisham. She's a weird person. But anyway, so Pip meets the girl he will fall in love with, Estella, through Miss Havisham. So Miss Havisham is this wealthy old lady who lives in the same city as him. And she decides that she wants him to come to her house once in a while and play with Estella. For example, play cards. Yeah, sorry, I'm telling this. I was just weirded out by this part of the story, and Miss Havisham is just
Yeah, Miss
very weird
Havisham
old
is a
lady.
very interesting character because she lives through an evolution throughout the novel. But at the start, when Pete meets her, she lives like in a mansion
Yeah,
with the Estella, but she wears a wedding dress because she's been left at the altar, so she's not married, but
oh, yeah,
she wears a wedding dress every day. And I was shocked because there's great description, by the way, of the like the room where all the wedding food
yeah.
still is after all this years. So you can imagine like the rotten smell, the mold, and
Oh, yeah.
everything. And you like, you don't really know if she's crazy.
She is. She gotta be. She has to be.
She's very weird, but she's super important to the story too.
Yeah. Oh my god. That story of like her keeping the room the same way and even the clock
Yeah.
at the
Ah,
exact
I
time
forgot this
when she was
detail.
it's like I mean it's literally like she stopped the time, like she decided to keep the room the same way it was when she was left at the
Yeah.
altar. And that's like, I mean, on the one hand it's like I get it, like the trauma of your fiance deciding to leave you, but it's like kind of weird at the same time to keep that and still dress with your wedding dress.
Yeah.
But so anyway, Miss Havisham, and she adopted Estella, and that's why we have this character that Pip falls in love with. But from the start, we get that Estella is pretty cold towards him, or at least
She's a mean little girl. She's awful. I hate her.
I like how you're like giving it
Yeah,
like
I don't like her at all.
she. I mean, yes, I'm not gonna defend her because she's really mean to Pip. But at the same time, I guess she was raised to be cold-hearted. Oh, not to say that it's okay, like, the way she acts, but I don't know. I don't want to reveal too much about, like, how, like, the circumstances of her being adopted by Miss Havisham, because that's part of the many plot twists that we get in the book. But yeah, anyway. And so when Pip gets his fortune, he thinks that it comes from Miss Havisham. And so he has this great expectation of,
Yeah.
he has this,
Ooh.
no, I was going to say
Okay.
he expects that it means that he's meant to marry Estella. Like, for him, that's when he gets the money, he's like, okay, Miss Havisham wants to keep it a secret, but she just gave me this huge amount of money and she thinks I have to marry Estella. So he's like super happy because it's like, okay, she's meant for me or something like that. And we'll see that a lot of things happen after that because it's not gonna turn out this perfect way that Pip pictures at the beginning. And so in terms of theme and things that you liked about the book, I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, sure. I think, and it's a common theme for Dickens novels. I love David Copperfield, like Oliver Twist too, and it's funny because Great Expectation, it's not that different. So Dickens, I think, was a big fan of young orphans looking for their fortune in life. Yeah,
Isn't it like, I'm not an expert on his life, but I guess it comes from his personal experience,
yeah,
right? Because this whole thing of money, and especially at that time, people who had debts could be imprisoned.
yeah.
I
And
know in
sent to
other,
Australia.
yeah, because I know in Little Dorrit, I didn't read it, but I saw the adaptation. That's the whole story, is like Dorrit, her dad, is in prison for that. So I guess it's also, it relates to his life. So maybe that's
Mm.
why you had this impression that he writes the same
Yeah,
story
it's
all
always
over
the same
again.
book, but with different characters. But what I really like about this book, all the characters are super interesting. And you can see the evolution from when, for example, Pete is a child to his adult life. And what I really like in Dickens, and it's surprising for that time, with the politics and everything happening, like the British society and everything, like it doesn't say, oh, it's good to look for better conditions for yourself and to move from poverty to nobility. He emphasizes how you can lose yourself sometimes by looking for another way of living. And it's exactly what happens with Pete. So I won't go into details, but he loses himself
Yeah.
and then he realizes that it's the people who were like present for him are the most humble ones, not
Yeah.
those with like more money. So that's a team I really like because Joe, for example, so you
Yeah, I
mentioned
was going to talk
Joe,
about Joe.
Pip's uncle, he supports Pip like for the entirety of the novel and is not
Yeah.
rich at all with money, but is rich in his art.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think it's the same thing in Oliver Twist, in David Copperfield, in all of Dickens' books. He highlights how it's important to be a good person with your values more
Yeah.
than having money. And it's really modern for the time because we're talking about Victorian England.
Yeah, I agree. And I love Joe's character. He's such a good parent to Pip. I mean,
Yeah.
even though obviously he's not his dad, he's married to his sister, so he's an uncle, but and it's also heartbreaking to see how Pip treats him at the beginning. And I think even from the start, even though it takes some time for Pip to realize that, he knows it's bad for him to be ashamed of Joe. It's like, just because he became rich and now he can be a gentleman, he's like ashamed of, like, but don't want to be associated with my past life of, being raised in a blacksmith's house, whatever. So yeah, it's
But
heartbreaking.
Pip, in my opinion, Pip is not a good person. Joe is the good person in this book.
Yeah.
Because you can say, even as a child, yes, is not as bad as Estella, for example. You say I really don't like her, but like
We
it
hate
keeps
Estella.
making mistakes, and it's normal when you grow up, but even as an adult. But Joe is consistent.
In being good. Yeah. But wait, we didn't say that, but the book is told from Pip's perspective. So he's the narrator. So we still have this, even though I agree that Pip is not perfect, he's not, I don't know if I would say he's a bad person, but he's whatever. Um, for some reason, because he's the narrator, I'm still a bit rooting for him because I
Yeah.
see, like, since we see his perspective, I'm easily on his side sometimes, even though I'm like, why would you be so in love with Estella? Like, she's mean to you. Why would
Yeah.
you be whatever? But also, I think to me, when I was reading the book, I pictured a very young Pip. And so maybe that's
Mm.
why I tended to understand, like, be on his side, because I was like, oh, you're
I get
young.
what you
But
mean.
I agree with you. He is supposed to be an adult. Like, throughout the book, he gets older. So it's not okay to still be the way he is. So I get that. I get it.
What did you think about like the plot twist and the
Oh my
big
God.
revelations in this book? Because there are many.
Yeah, part of me wants to give out one plot twist because I'm like, whatever, it's a classic, like, probably people have heard of it, but I'm not going to do it because I still liked the fact that I was not expecting
Mm.
one of the plot twists. So I like that. Like, I was surprised. I was not, because, okay, what I can say is, uh, I said before that Pip thinks Miss Havisham is the benefactor, his benefactor, and she's the one who gave him the money. And so from the start, I was like, something's off. Like, the lady is weird. The lady is mean. Like, Miss Havisham, she's mean. She's weird. She's kind of crazy. So I'm like, what are the odds that she's the benefactor? Like,
Mm.
I knew something was like, there was going to be a plot twist there. I didn't know what kind of plot twist. And so I was not surprised that we had a big revelation, but I was not expecting that one. It's so weird talking about something without talking about it.
Yeah.
But also, I will say that at the end of the book, there are a lot of revelations, and some of them I was like, dude, you went
Yeah.
too far.
Maybe what we can say is Dickens tried to connect every character.
Yeah. Okay.
They
That's a good
all
one.
have a past history or link, but it's it's not needed.
No,
We don't
it's
have
not useful.
connections with each other in real life.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a about this person is linked to this person and is linked to this other person.
Yeah.
They all link together, but no, it's not even a plot twist at this point because you're just like, why?
Yeah. It, it, it doesn't add anything to the
No,
characters, I
to
think,
the story.
because it, I agree. So I was a bit like, that was unnecessary, like, to connect, as you said, connect all the characters together. And that's a good way to put it without giving out too much information. So it's not that I didn't like it, but I was like, don't really care for it. But what I will say is I agree with you on the modern writing. And actually I haven't read a classic in a long time, I think. At least not a Victorian era classic and so I don't know if it's very basic what I'm going to say, but um it's a good experience to realize that throughout the ages we humans share so much. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I'm not saying that this exact book could have been written today, but the way it's told, the themes and everything, it felt modern. But I guess it's just
Modern.
because it's human. I guess, it's just like some elements are just human nature. And so I guess it just makes sense that it would, like, a modern reader would still like it. I don't know. But I was kind of shocked. And also the fact that it's told from Pip's perspective felt very, I don't know. I was gonna say active, not active, but it's like it sucks you in, just like any
Mm,
other novel can suck you in. And I remember when I was a teenager, I did read a lot of classics, and for example, some classics in particular, like obviously Jane Austen, but also Bronte sisters' book, like Jane Eyre, whatever. And I remember my mom, she told me about some of her favorite books from Goethe. And one of the books, I don't know the title in English, I'm sorry, but one of the books had a title that sounded very intellectual to me. And so I was like, I'm not sure I want, like, it's a classic. This title sounds very complicated, or not complicated, but whatever. And so I did not want to read it, but I ended up reading it because my mom was like, you should really read it. It's really good. And so I read it, and I realized that it was just amazing. And I don't know how people feel about classics today, because usually there are books that we study at school and books that we are told to read. You're like,
mm.
oh, it's a classic, you have to read it. Knowing that you can enjoy the experience as much as any other book is, I don't know, it's powerful. And so I'm going to look up obviously Goethe's book title because I don't have it in English, but um that's my fun fact, like also
But you
connecting the
have
dots with the
different
classics.
classics too, because a classic from the 19th century and written in the way Dickens wrote his books are super different than a classic from the 16th century or a Shakespeare
No, that's
novel,
true. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not approachable as a reader because you don't even understand the words. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing actually in other languages, because I remember reading in French Montaigne, and
Yeah.
it's not very accessible either.
No. Yeah.
I think the way, and once again, because it was written for a newspaper, so for all the people at the time to be able to read, it's another level than
Yeah.
other novels from the time written for people who could have books. And the people were able to buy books in the 19th century where nobility were rich, not the people like reading newspapers. So I think that's the big difference, because in
Yeah.
Great Expectations, he uses basic words. Of course, it's another English. It's not a 21st
Yeah,
century
but
English.
still, yeah,
It's still approachable.
that's a good point. And I think that's probably one of the fears that people have when it comes to books written hundreds of years ago is it going to be easy for me to understand and follow? But that's a good point. Obviously, like 18th century is still modern compared to previous centuries, or like Middle Ages books, or that's harder to read. That's a good point. But so that's yeah, that's my experience of reading this book, and I'm happy that we picked it because it was a good opportunity for me to read a Dickens novel, because I don't really think about classics today. I do reread some of the classics that I liked. Obviously, again, I'm going to talk about her,
I
but
know what
Jane
you're going to
Austen.
say.
Yeah, I read several times most of her books, most of her novels at least. And so obviously Jane Austen is an exception, but I don't know if I put in my TBR classics nowadays. I don't
Mm,
think I do that.
neither.
Cuz it's like it's we did that in school, so, for French or English lessons and teachers telling us to read books, but when you're an adult, I don't know, I kind of lost that.
Yeah, and we tend to, I know from other readers and book clubs, and we tend to read new books
Yeah.
because that's the books marketed to us. Oh, there's a new book by this author.
Yeah. But what I do like is a very good rewriting of
Yeah.
a story. I mean, it's not like I've read a lot of them, but I like the idea of playing with a story that was written that's such a classic that people know, like the basic
Mm.
storyline, maybe not everything, but basic storyline, and then you have this new author taking that and making a new novel. And one example that I think is very interesting is mythology, like the Greek classics because like from the start they were stories that would be told to people. Obviously they were written too, but it's like because they were told, there were different versions, and it's like interpretation as well. Like the person telling the story can be interpreting, oh, is this character in love with this other one, this god, did he or she do this and that? And what I like about it is this idea of you have basic material that exists, and then different people can take it and mold it differently and have something beautiful made out of it. And so that's why I like what Madeline Miller did
Yeah.
with
Love her,
Circe and
books.
Circe and the Song of Achilles, because obviously when she wrote those two novels, she had to decide on how the story was going to be told. And maybe it's not the exact same way that another author or like some version that you find in ancient Greek was written, whatever. But, and so, yeah, this idea of rewriting, I like that, or giving depth to characters, or that's a very interesting modern or contemporary thing that authors do.
Maybe we could recommend a few classicals we like,
Yeah.
inspired by Dickens or not.
What are yours? What are your recommendations?
Well, of course, I love British classics. So our listeners know we love Jane Austen. So every novel written by Jane Austen. I love the Bronte sisters too. I love Wuthering Heights. I love Heathcliff. So that's my
Talking about,
favorite classic.
I was going to say, talking about the theme of passionate love, because
Yeah,
in Great Expectations, Pip is so very passionately in love with Estella. Well, we do have the same theme is Wuthering Heights, because
yeah,
what happens between Heathcliff and Catherine is pretty intense. So
yeah. I love Frankenstein too, and especially Mary Shelley. So it's like having female authors like from the 19th century. We don't have many. Like from the top of my head, I know of course Jane Austen, Bronte sisters, Mary Shelley. But
that's a good point.
do we have others? I don't know. At least not
Another
from the
one,
top of my head.
another one from 19th century as well is Elizabeth Gaskell. I really like.
I don't know her.
Oh my god, I loved her book North and South, and
Okay.
it's about, I don't know if it's in the realm of classics, but to me it is. So whatever. So North and South is about the north of England and the south of England and the different types of people and mentalities that you would have, because in the north you have a lot of industrial cities with especially the cotton, what do you call them? Factories, cotton factories and everything. And so it's the story of this girl moving from south of England where, you know, she's like living this peaceful life. Her dad is he's a pastor or he works for he's a clergyman anyway. And so they moved to the north of England in this very industrial city. And so there's this clash of,
Wow,
anyway,
I have to read this book.
it's, I mean, it's a pretty thick book, but it's a very good one written by a female author, and there is a very good adaptation. So I can send you the
Yes,
name
please.
and the link. It's a mini series, but we like mini series. So
Wow.
I think it's BBC, but I'm not sure it's BBC. And so yeah, female
Okay,
author.
wow, okay.
You're right.
Top of my
There are
list,
not a lot of
especially
them.
because I lived in the north.
Yeah, yeah. But I agree with you. There are not a lot of female authors. So I just thought about her because you said that.
Great. Another one I really like, speaking of, because obviously Dickens is all about like social, like different classes, social climbing and everything. So I'll say one I really like is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And that's interesting for me because I'm not Oscar Wilde's biggest fan. I don't really like his writing, but I like the story.
Okay.
And I love this story. I love the adaptations. I've seen all the movies. So yeah, I highly recommend that one.
Oh, yeah, Picture of Dorian Gray is a good one. I actually, talking about classics that we can read today, I actually read it last year when I was in Ireland. Because I had started it so many years ago, and I was like, I never finished it. I knew the story because I had watched the movie. So I actually read it exactly like October last year, when I
Oh,
was
wow.
in Ireland. It was very fitting that I was traveling there and reading the book, since Oscar Wilde is from Dublin. Anyway, you mentioned the Bronte sisters, and I think
Mm.
I read Jane Eyre when I was a teenager. I absolutely loved it. And some years later, I was studying English literature at university, and we had to read a book called Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rice. I guess that's how it's pronounced. And what I liked about it, and it connects the dots with what I said about adaptations and basically this book, it's a very short novel. And even though it doesn't explicitly say that it's about Mr. Rochester, you understand, you understand what's happening. And so it's centered around his wife. So in
Okay.
Jane Eyre, hopefully it's not
The
a
wife, yeah,
spoiler.
within the attic.
Exactly. So basically in Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester has a wife and she's locked up in the attic, and we are told that she's crazy. Okay. And so what happens here is this author decided to tell the story of this young lady who married Mr. Rochester.
This is
And
such a
so
great idea
it's
because we
so
have so many
cool.
novels with side characters. We don't know their life. We don't know how they ended up like being crazy, as they say.
Yeah. And it's particularly interesting because she's considered crazy, but that's Mr. Rochester's
Interpretation, yeah.
interpretation of it. And maybe it suits him that she's considered that way. And why why is she crazy if she is? And so I don't know how famous it is, but it has been adapted into a movie as well. So I watched
Oh,
the
okay.
movie on top of reading the book, but I really recommend it. It's short, it's different. And if you have read Jane Eyre, I feel like it's eye-opening on when you tell a story, it's from one point of view. So yeah, it was a good addition to Jane Eyre.
Okay.
And the other one that I want to recommend, same story. I read it because I studied English literature at university and it was part of the program for the year. And it's called, okay, same thing, super hard to say. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. So maybe you recognize two of the characters from Hamlet. And it's actually not a novel, it's a play by Tom Stoppard. Hopefully I'm saying it right. And so basically what he does there is the last sentence of Hamlet by Shakespeare is this sentence: Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. That's the last sentence of the play that everyone knows about. And so that's the title of his own play. And it's a weird, weird story on those two side characters from Hamlet. I don't even know how to explain it, so I'm not selling it right now. But it's a play where you see those two characters throughout the story of Hamlet, and you know they're gonna die. And basically, when you read this play, you don't know if they're already dead or if it's
Mm.
so. It's kind of same thing. It has been adapted into a movie, and even in the movie, it's really well done because the way it's shot, the movie, it kind of feels like they're already dead. As I said, like they already don't exist. Anyway, I'm going to put the reference in the show notes on the movie as well because the casting is amazing. For example, one of the characters is played by Gary Oldman. So just to say how famous the cast is. And so same thing, you know Hamlet, you know Shakespeare, you know the themes, and then you have this additional story or like piece of art that is created by someone else. And I just like that.
Yeah, and it's super interesting actually because I was thinking as you were explaining the plot and everything. That's the reason why they're classics. Because when you see, and it can be any art form, it can be like a painting or music. If a piece of art is adapted by other artists, like years after, it's proof for me it's really art because it can still touch people.
Mm.
So yeah, I love the way people adapt like old books, adapt to movies, because now we love Pride and Prejudice, but all this adaptation, there's a new one coming, but it can be music too, with like
Yeah.
new, like a pop song, but drawing from a classic song or with classic tunes. So I love to think
Yeah.
about art evolving through time. So that's interesting for
Yeah.
books.
And also, what do you think is a book that came out pretty recently that will in the future be considered a classic? Because it's easy for us, like we are in 2025, and so our classics are in the past. And I don't know how close to us a book can be considered a classic, but I feel like there's this period of like, I don't know if I'm making any sense right now, but when you go into a bookstore, you have a section with classics, right? Like they are set apart from the other books. And usually there are books written in, I don't know, 18th century, 19th century, whatever. But when are we going to see books that were written in and considered a classic? Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah. But
How
you
long
know
does it
what?
take for a book to become a classic? And also in the books that you have read recently, do you think one of them is going to be considered a classic someday?
That's a very good question because I see a big difference with books from the past and books now. Now, when you've got success with a book, you write another book. And we've got series now. So, for example, I love fantasy. For if a fantasy book is a success, like Fourth Wing, then she writes a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one, and a fifth one.
Yeah.
And you've got a series of books. But when you've got series, and when I think about romance, we had an episode about romance. I read a
Mm.
lot of romance. It's the same in every genre.
Yeah.
And I don't really see how, like, a series of books can then be readapted. So that's a very good
Yeah.
question because I don't really see
Well,
classics
I was
being
gonna
like
say that.
drawn from these books.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Okay, I was gonna say I just thought of one book that is recent, quite recent, that is already considered a classic: Harry Potter. Can
Yeah.
we agree that? I mean, it was, when you think about it, it's recent. Like, I mean, obviously not as recent as like a book that just came out, but and I feel like it's already considered by many people a classic,
Yeah,
and
you're
probably in
right.
the future it's going to be considered that way. So maybe Harry Potter is a good example.
But what they do now, they do extra from the books with the play, with
Yeah.
series and the new series and everything. They don't reinvent the story. But yeah,
But,
yeah, I
but
know
do you
what you
think,
mean. And
wait,
it's definitely a classic.
wait, so do you think that in order to become a classic, you need to be adapted and reused by pop culture or other artists? And that is what makes you a classic? Does that,
A good question. Wow. We're having a philosophical debate today.
I mean, it's just so interesting because when you like reading books, you're aware of the different genres. As I said, like classics, usually we study them at school. And then I'm just wondering, like today, when I read, for example, I don't know, a novel by, damn it, what's her name? Okay, when someone reads The Handmaid's Tale,
Yeah. Margaret Atwood.
thank you, Margaret Atwood. When you read Margaret Atwood today, will she be considered a classic in 50 or 100 years? 50 years or 100 years, you know?
I think so. But once again, they made a series from the book.
They did, yeah.
The thing is, I think because it's easier, I don't know if it needs to be adapted or like reinterpreted to be a classic, but it's a way of seeing the book impact on the world.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult to know when there's only the book. So maybe that's why, but like there's no, like I don't own the truth. It's just a way for me to see
Sure.
a book is impactful for society, the way Harry Potter has been.
I just for the sake of, since we are embracing this tangent, on my computer, I just asked ChatGPT what makes a book a classic. So a classic book isn't just old, obviously. It's a work that endures across time, culture, and generation because of its literary quality, universal themes, and lasting influence. So I get that's why you talked about adaptations, because it's like, it's a good book. It is considered, like, a book is considered a good book, and then universal themes, so love, social justice, whatever. And then lasting influence is like, people still talk about it today and still read it and still adapt it. Interesting. Okay.
Well, I love the part about influence across generations because, for example, it's not a book, but speaking of movies, Star Wars, it's a classic because they like made different adaptations and because they did something new, like 20 years after the first movies, our generation like suddenly discover the first movies. And then they add a new movie, even I think 3 movies 5 years
Exactly.
ago. So now nieces, nephew generation know about Star Wars.
Yeah.
So once again, it's because they do something new
Yeah.
that we know about the original
That's true.
one.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. I just like thinking about how the books that I'm reading nowadays can become
Yeah,
such classics, like,
that's super interesting questions. Thank you, Mary.
yeah.
You inspired today.
Because they were questions that I asked myself. So I was like, I need to share that with someone else. But anyway, so we really just went on a huge tangent. But obviously Charles Dickens has written several books that are still part of the cultural landscape. I think when it comes to Great Expectations, the most recent adaptation, if I'm not wrong, wait, let me check the years on my computer. But I think there is one that was pretty famous in 2012.
I was surprised because there's a movie, but it's not set in the 19th century. It's a retelling in the 20th century. So it's a bit weird. You don't have the same characters. You don't have the same, well, you kind of have the same characters, but set in another time period. So it's really confusing.
Is it the one that
with famous actors?
Yeah, I was gonna I think I for some reason it okay, it speaks to me for some reason, but I don't know when it was released. I'm trying to look the dates. But yeah, just to say that there are several adaptations. I actually haven't watched any of them. Great Expectations is not a movie or a story that I knew before, but I think I'm happy that I read the book without knowing what was going to happen. I think I'm happy about that, I guess.
You can really leave the plot twist.
Exactly. I was like, what? Oh, especially because part of the book I read, like the actual book, but also I listened to part of it. I will give the link for that as well, but I bought this on Audible. I bought this bundle of classics read by actors and actresses, and Great Expectations was read by Stephen Fry. I don't know if you know him, but very famous actor, British actor. And he did an amazing job at doing all the voices, and I don't know. It was a nice experience listening to the book as well. But I guess that's it. I don't know if you want to give a rating, or do classics need to be, reviewed like out of 5 stars?
Interesting question too.
Do you
Yes,
have
I
one?
think so. Because there are like classics well, I don't even know if there are classics I dislike.
How
But
many?
there are classics I like more than others.
Yeah. So how many stars would you give to Great
Maybe
expectations?
4, because I really like the book, but maybe that's because I read David Copperfield and Oliver Twist before. For me, it was like a retelling, but with different characters.
Okay.
So if you ask me about Oliver Twist, I will say 5 stars, because it's the first I read. So yeah, maybe
Okay,
4
that makes
stars.
sense. Okay, I think I would give 4 stars too because it was not my favorite classic or anything. So it's still a good book. I'm happy that I read it. I like the style. Interesting to get to know Charles Dickens, but yeah, 4 stars. But I was lucky that it's the first one that I read because I didn't have the same experience as you with the repetition with David Copperfield and everything. But yeah, no, that was fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you for your questions today.
No problem.
I think. Thank you. Bye.
That's it for this chapter of Book Nook. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review.
Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Book Nook the Podcast for more bookish fun, and we'll see you next time. Until then, happy reading!